Hello again. I'm back with another clock to repair. This is one I haven't seen before. It's a standard electric time company clock. One of my subscribers contacted me asking if I might be able to repair this for him, and I said I would give it a try. I looked up the history of the standard electric time company, discovered that it was founded in 1884 in Waterbury, Connecticut, and they moved to Springfield, Massachusetts in 1911. And what they were known for were making what were known as electric clock systems, which were installed in schools, universities, public buildings, and it consisted of having a master clock, which then controlled all of the secondary clocks. Now, I don't know if this one is a master clock or just a regular one. It's unusual. There's a chain on top here, as if it was hanging from somewhere. There's a knob on the front, which lets you set the hands. If I turn it around to the back, there's a label, just reads the Standard Electric Time Company, Springfield, Massachusetts. The power cord is pretty badly frayed, so I'm not even going to try to plug it in yet. So what I think I'm going to do is get it set up on my work table and look to start taking it apart, and we'll see if I get lucky and get it working. The first thing I want to do is check the continuity of the circuit, see if the wiring is intact. To do that, I'll use my ohm meter and just have to touch the leads to the plug, and if everything is connected, you'll see numbers flashing here. Okay, got numbers flashing, so the wiring is intact and therefore it should be repairable. So what I want to do now, turn it over. That's the chain rattling. I'm going to undo these 4 screws and see what we get. Okay. Oh, how about that? This is a Telecron rotor in here. It says, very good, registered U.S. Telecron Patent Office motor movement type B4. The Warren Telecron Company. How about that? Okay, so I'm kind of familiar with these. Here's the mechanism for setting the hands. All right, let me get to work figuring out the best way to take this apart and at what point can I plug it in to see if it runs. Let me take a closer look at this power cord and see if I want to risk it or if I'm going to look to put a new cord on. What I've decided to do is this power cord is attached to these 2 wires here just with some electrical tape. So I'm going to undo this and get a nice clean connection with a new power cord before I even try to plug it in. So let me work on that. I've removed the tape, and what I found is these 2 smaller wires are actually soldered to this heavier wire, and this is a cloth covered one, so this is quite old. But what I'm going to do is just cut off the connection here, and I'll just strip the insulation and I'll attach a new power cord. Here's 1, 2. I'm not really sure of the age of this clock. There is a number stamped on the plate down here which reads 2352. I don't know if that means February 3rd of 1952 or hard to say, but it is pretty old as far as I can tell based on the fact that it's a cloth covered wire. Anyway, let me come up with a new power cord, strip these wires, attach it, and we'll see if it works. I've attached a new power cord. I'm going to plug it in. Let's turn it over. And turn it on. And it's not running. All right. Now, the most likely reason could be a frozen rotor. So now I'm going to have to look to get the whole mechanism out of here. I'll take a closer look to figure out how I want to approach it, but most likely the first thing I have to do is remove the hands. Now the minute hand, I think, is just a friction grip. I may just place a little WD-40 on it to loosen it up before I even try to pry it off. It's painted with red paint, which is, every time I touch it, it seems to be flaking off. And then underneath this, it looks like a nut is holding on the minute and hour hand. So let me get my WD-40 on here, and we'll let it soak in for a few minutes. I just sprayed a little bit into a cap. All right, I'll give this about 10-15 minutes, and then we'll give it a try. It's been a while. Let's see how this goes. Oh, it comes straight out. Okay, nice. Let's just clean it off a little bit here. Try to loosen this nut here. The paint's flaking off all these hands. This one's pretty tight still, so I'm going to look to apply a bit more of my WD-40. And we'll give this a good 10-15 minutes. I'm ready to give it another try. There we go. Okay, what I have to do, I think, is take a closer look to see if I need to remove these 4 screws to get the whole movement out of here, which I think is what I'll have to do. And this should just drop right out. So let's just go ahead and do that. Hopefully the set knob won't be in the way here. I also have to not let the thing drop once the screw is out. So let's put something underneath it. What do we have here? Okay. you go. Let's put this aside. Okay, so the dial. I'm going to have to actually, okay, I've got to get the rotor out of here to test if it's working or not. So the next step is, well, we should take the dial off so I don't damage it. There's just 2 screws holding it in place. All right. Now, I see 3 screws here, which is what's holding the whole mechanism in place, but I'm going to have to remove this. This will be in the way. So this is held on just by 2 screws, but I'm going to have to remove this knob. Let me take a closer look to see if this is threaded or a friction grip. So give me some time to work on that. In looking at this closely, I think I see some threads over here. So I think if I grab it with a pair of pliers, I might be able to unscrew the knob. Yep. Now I can undo these couple of screws here. With a washer. And this is going to lift up and out. Okay, now I can flip it over, remove these 3 screws. And let's see what we have. So I have to get into here for the gears. And to remove the rotor, take these screws off. Okay. Here's the rotor, and under here are the gears, and I'll deal with this in a moment. Let's see if I can turn this a little bit by hand. It feels quite frozen, so I may have to pick a spot, make a hole, put in some liquid wrench to clean out the old dried up oil in here, and then try to re-lubricate it. Let me see if I can get set up for that. But before I do that, let me just plug this in just to make sure that it's actually not running. Okay, plugged in. Let's turn it on. No, it's not running. All right, so the issue is the rotor. And now let's lift this up and take a look at the gears. And I have to hope a spring isn't under here. I don't want something to suddenly pop out of position. Perhaps I'll try to lift it up this way. There we go. Well, that's a pretty simple design. Whoop. All right, let's leave this here for the moment, and I'm going to get to work on the rotor. So what I look to do, I'll pick a spot, make a small hole, and start looking to clean it out. So let me get set up for that. I'm not going to show the whole process of drilling the hole and cleaning out the oil. I do have a video on how to clean a Telecron rotor, which goes into all that detail. However, what I did for this one is I had read that if you heat these up, for example, in a toaster oven, it'll loosen up the oil that has thickened, and then they start to work. So just to try it, I ended up heating this with my hot air gun, and I found that when I put it back in the coil, and if I seat the minute hand, and turn it on, it runs. So it is working. However, I believe that once this cools down long enough, the oil is just going to thicken up again and it'll stop working. So I still plan to open it up. And a couple of tips for drilling into these, because you have to pick a spot that you hope will be safe. One thing I'll do is, instead of placing a drill bit right onto it, I'll actually tap into it with a very pointy nail set tool. And when I have the spot that I'm going to drill, if I tap it with a hammer, it'll make a little indent so that the drill bit won't sort of dance around. Another thing I will do is I'll use a very small drill bit and I'll sink it as far into the drill as I can. So when it enters, it's not going to go deep enough to hit any of the gears. Also, I'll apply some lithium grease to the tip of the drill bit. That way, any metal filings that are generated are not going to go into the rotor. They'll stay on the bit. Anyway, let me get to work now on doing all of that. I made the hole, and the process is I'll put in some liquid wrench, let it soak for 12 hours, and then drain it. Then fill it with some 3-in-1 oil, let that sit for 12 hours and drain it. And then finally place some synthetic clock oil in it, and then close this up. I'll solder the hole, and then I'll be ready to test the rotor. What I found is that solder does not stick to this metal, so I couldn't use it to seal the hole. What I did was I placed some metal tape over it and then sealed it with some epoxy glue. I also cleaned up the rotor, and there's a bit of writing on it. I'll try to show you. It says it's the B2 type, the word top, 1 RPM, 60 cycles, and the number 48. Now, my understanding is this is one of the earlier rotors that Telecron made, and I believe they were used in the 1940s and 50s. That 48 could mean this was made in 1948. However, the clock I'm working on, I think that was from the 50s. As far as the word top being here, what that refers to is when you place these back into the clock, it needs to be up top. And that way, according to what I'm reading, it makes sure that the oil thoroughly covers all the gears that are in here. Anyway, let me set this up in the coil, and we'll give it a test run. Put on the minute hand. Have it plugged in. We'll turn it on. And it's running. Very good. So what I'm going to do next is look to clean up the parts that are here. A couple of these gears I can remove. These two are riveted into position, so I can't take them off. But this is all brass. This can go into my ultrasonic with some soapy water. I'll use Dawn detergent. I can also clean up this without having to take it apart. Once everything's been cleaned, then I'll just look to reassemble. So let me get to work on all of that. Everything is cleaned and lubricated. I'll show how I did that. I use a bit of synthetic clock oil, put a couple of drops in the well, and using an oil pen, I'll just put a little bit around the pivots where the gears rotate, anywhere they turn. On gears that fit inside each other, like this, I'll place some on the inside and around the stem. Anyway, let's see if I can remember how to put this back together. This is going to go here. Nope, this is first. And this. And then I have to seat this disc. Here we go. And this will sit like that. Now I have to seat these washers, and this will get positioned into the plate. Right, like that. Now I just have to secure this with the 3 screws. Let me go ahead and do the other couple, and then I'll continue. The plate is secure. What I have to do now is place the time set mechanism back on here. Fits like that, and a couple of screws. There's one. Come on. Okay, next we're going to place the rotor, and I have to position it with the word top on top. This is the top of the clock, so I rotate this like that. Okay. Then seat the coil. Seat the bracket, and we'll screw this down. One there. And one here. Okay. Now, I'm going to make sure it's still running, but this time I'm going to see all the hands. The hour. Maybe it goes the other way. There we go. Hour, minute, which only fits one way. So I'll have to, there we go. And then the second hand. All right, let me plug it in. And we'll turn it on. Now I'm going to let this run for a while and just make sure that all the hands are functioning and keeping proper time. And once I'm confident of that, then I'll return and we'll continue. It's been running now for a few hours and it's been keeping perfect time. One thing I had to do, I found that the minute hand was hitting the hour hand because a lot of play in it. So I had to seat the nut to hold it tight. I also placed the set knob on so I could easily set the time. And what I want to do now, before putting everything back together, is I'd like to try to restore the rest of the clock as much as I can. I'm going to try to strip off the old paint and repaint the hands. The dial I discovered almost as if somebody did some painting at some point, and there's a lot of black specks here. Looks like paint. I don't know if I can clean those off, but I'm going to give that a try. And I want to paint the case. It's just metal, and it's full of scratches. It's really badly beat up. I definitely would consider this an industrial clock. The other thing that I don't understand, I think someone, after this was put together, attached these side arms along with a chain to hang. And the chain is actually in two pieces. So I'm not really sure on what the whole point of it is. They kind of hook together. However, I think I'm going to remove these, try to restore, and then repaint everything. And then at some point, if it wants to be hung up, it can be reattached. Otherwise, I think it would look good on a shelf somewhere. I'll do the same to the back plate. I can remove the data plate, paint this up nice, and then place this back on. So let me get to work looking to clean up and touch up and paint everything. And once that's all done, then we'll continue. Okay, I'll show you what I've done. I've painted the hands, the hour and the minute hand, as well as the second hand. I also cleaned up the data plate. And I painted the back plate of the case. You can see the difference from what the inside of it looks like. I didn't have to paint that. And the case. So what I want to do next is, I also cleaned off those little black specks of paint on the dial. So that's looking a lot better as well. And the first thing I want to do now is just position the dial back onto the clock. And this is held on by two small screws. And I find with these little ones, it's easy to get them in if you hold them with a small pair of pliers, forceps or tweezers, whatever you want to call it. Here's one. And two. Now I also removed the power cord from the clock because it's going to have to pass through the back plate before I can reattach it. Now we'll put this back into the case. I find helps is if I prop it up. Now I have 4 screws I have to place in here. Come on. Here's the first one. I'm going to go ahead and do the other 3 on my own, and then I'll continue. The clock is back in the case. And now I'm going to reposition the set knob. And what I want to do is grab the stem here really tight, so that when I screw this on, I can tighten it up enough so that no matter which way you set the clock, it won't unscrew. Okay. Now, I have to pass the power cord through the back plate. And before reattaching it to these wires, I'm going to put a knot in it. That way, no risk of pulling this apart. Twist this up again. There's one. And 2. Okay. So I'll place this here. Slide this back over. And I'll secure this with the 4 screws. I'll do that on my own, and then I'll continue. The back is in place. Now I have to put on the data plate. All right, the last thing is to seat the hands. So we'll start with the minute hand, just to see, because I have to get it on the 12. Now the hour hand. Minute hand. Tighten up this nut. and the second hand. Now I'm going to set it up on my workbench, plug it in, and we'll give it a final test. It's set up and it's plugged in. I can adjust the time either forwards or back. Let me turn it on. And it's running. So there you have it. It's an industrial clock made by the Standard Electric Time Company. I think it's from around 1950. I'm pretty pleased how this came out. I think it looks real nice. My plan now is to send it back to my subscriber, Mike in Massachusetts. I hope he likes it and is happy with it. I look forward to any questions or comments on this or any other clock. I try to reply to every one of them. And that pretty much wraps things up. Bye for now.